Evan Cole had always been alone. On the mining planet of Tarragon 9, humans were few and far between, scattered like tiny sparks across the endless rust-colored deserts. The air was thin and harsh, and most days the only company he had were the rumble of his ore cart and the faint echoes of distant machinery. Life was about extracting what little the planet offered and surviving. There was no room for hope, no space for mistakes, and certainly no place for kindness. The Baron's rule was absolute. He did not tolerate failure or rebellion, and the locals, mostly alien miners, kept their heads down, afraid to speak, afraid to even breathe wrong. Humans were considered tools, expendable, and even a minor act of defiance could earn one the worst punishments. Evan had learned this early. He had lost friends, had seen men and women broken by fear, and yet he survived. One morning, after hours of digging and hauling ore, Evan decided to take a different route back to the settlement. It was dangerous, longer and poorly monitored, but he wanted to avoid the Baron's enforcers and the increasingly hostile eyes of alien miners. The desert stretched endlessly, a canvas of reddish sand and jagged rocks, the sky a pale orange, burnt by the twin suns. The silence was heavy, pressing against his ears as he pulled the ore cart across the uneven ground. And then he saw her. She hung from a tall pole like a gruesome warning. Her small frame swayed slightly in the wind, her pale blue skin almost glowing under the harsh suns. Around her neck was a metallic sign, etched with sharp letters, "The Baron never forgives." The sight froze Evan in his tracks. For a moment he thought it might be some trick, some illusion conjured to frighten passers-by. But as he stepped closer, he saw her chest rise and fall in shallow breaths. Her eyes were closed, lips slightly parted, and her body trembled not from the wind, but from weakness. Evan knew instantly that the sign was not empty threat, it was a death sentence. Anyone who helped her would face the Baron's wrath, and that wrath was legendary. The locals did not even look in her direction. They passed by quickly, pretending not to see, their faces pale and their hands trembling. Evan's heart pounded. Helping her meant risking everything, yet leaving her there felt impossible. He swallowed, thinking of the countless warnings, of the stories of miners who had disappeared for far less. And yet, something inside him stirred, a stubborn, defiant spark that refused to let another innocent die while he watched. Carefully he approached the pole, scanning for traps or hidden observers. Nothing. Slowly he reached up and untied the ropes that held her. Her body sagged into his arms, light as a feather. She moaned softly, and Evan felt a surge of relief mixed with fear. He lowered her to the ground, gently laying her on a patch of shade formed by jagged rocks. "She's alive," he whispered, though the wind carried his words away. He crouched beside her, trying to assess her condition. Her breaths were shallow, her skin cold under his touch. He realized she had been left out in the sun for hours, or perhaps longer. "What should I do?" he muttered to himself. There was no doctor, no healer, only him, a human miner with little knowledge beyond survival and machines. He tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it to her forehead, hoping to cool her down. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing large, luminescent pupils that seemed almost too intelligent for a being her age. She studied him silently, and for a moment Evan felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. She was not just any alien, she was rare. Delicate, yes, but her gaze carried strength, awareness, and fear. Fear of the Baron, fear for her life. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "You'll die." Evan shook his head. "Not today," he replied. I can't just leave you here." Her eyes widened slightly, as if surprised that a human would even consider it. She tried to move, but her limbs were stiff and weak. Evan scooped her into his arms, careful not to hurt her further, and turned toward the tunnels he had used countless times while mining. The narrow network of abandoned shafts and old ore routes would provide some shelter, at least until he could figure out what to do next. The journey was slow. Every step sent a jolt of pain through the alien girl's body, and Evan had to pause often. But with each moment, he realized something remarkable. She was alive, and her presence was not just a burden. It was a spark of hope, fragile but undeniable. As he reached one of the older tunnels, he paused to listen. The faint hum of machinery and distant shouts were already growing louder. The Baron's enforcers would discover her absence soon, and they would not be forgiving. Fear clenched his chest, but he pushed forward. He had faced danger in the mines countless times, rock collapses, gas leaks, cave-ins, and yet this felt different. The stakes were higher, and the prize was not ore or credit, it was life. Inside the tunnel, Evan laid her gently on the ground, using some old mining blankets to keep her warm. He scavenged some water from a nearby pipe and tried to feed her slowly. She coughed weakly, then drank, and he felt a small surge of relief. "You're human," she whispered finally, as if confirming something. "I am," Evan replied, "and I'm going to get you out of here, somehow." Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt. She found none, and for a fleeting moment she seemed to relax. "You're brave or foolish," she murmured. "The Baron does not forgive." Evan grimaced. "I know, but I can't leave you to die." The hours passed slowly. Evan listened to the distant sounds outside the tunnel, the rumble of machinery, the occasional shout, the unmistakable sound of hovering vehicles searching. Every noise made his heart race. He knew that once they found her missing, it would be only a matter of time before they traced her to him. As darkness fell over the planet, the tunnel became colder, and the alien girl's breathing steadied. She told him her name, Lyra, and revealed that she was from a distant system, taken against her will to serve the Baron's schemes. Evan listened, astonished by the cruelty she described, but more amazed by her courage. Even in weakness, she carried a dignity and intelligence that seemed untouchable. Evan's mind raced with possibilities. How could he protect her? The tunnels were temporary. He knew that eventually they would be discovered. But the human in him, the stubborn, unyielding part of his nature, refused to give up. He had survived alone on Tarragon 9 for years, and now, he realized, he had a reason to fight that went beyond mere survival. He worked through the night, using old mining tools to barricade entrances, creating false paths and marking safe routes. Every noise outside made him tense, but he kept moving, methodical and calm. By dawn, the first rays of the twin suns cut through cracks in the tunnel, illuminating Lyra's face. She was awake, and though weak, she smiled faintly. "You saved me," she said softly. Evan shook his head. I couldn't just let you die. Not like that." Lyra's eyes held his for a long moment, and then she nodded, as if acknowledging something unspoken. She could not speak fully yet, but her presence was enough. And in that silent recognition, Evan understood something he had never realized in all his lonely years. Humans were underestimated, dismissed, and often treated as weak. But sometimes, the smallest and least noticed could change everything. The tunnel was quiet, but Evan knew this peace would not last. The Baron would send his enforcers, and soon. He had to move, had to plan, had to fight, but for the first time he did not feel alone. He had Lyra. And somehow, that made him feel stronger than he ever had in all his years of mining in isolation. He sat beside her as the suns rose, the dust storms beginning to stir in the distance. Tarragon 9 was harsh and unforgiving, but so was he. And now, so was hope. Evan had always known that hiding Lyra would not be easy. The tunnels provided some shelter, but he could not stay there forever. The Baron's enforcers would not rest until they found her, and Evan realized that time was running out. He moved carefully, his mind working faster than it had in years. Every tool, every scrap of old machinery, every abandoned shaft could be used to his advantage. Humans had a way of seeing possibilities that aliens often ignored, and Evan intended to use that now. Lyra rested against the wall of the tunnel, her body weak but slowly recovering. She was pale, her breathing still shallow but her eyes were sharp, watching every movement Evan made. She spoke little, but when she did, it carried weight. "You are human," she said quietly, "but you do not run. That is unusual." Evan shrugged. "Running doesn't fix anything. I need a plan." Lyra tilted her head. "The Baron will send hunters. They will track you through every tunnel. They will not stop until he has what he wants." Evan nodded grimly. He had expected as much. The Baron was known for his cruelty, but also for his pride. No one could defy him and live, not usually. But humans were unpredictable. Evan had survived situations that others would have thought impossible. He began moving through the tunnels, carefully checking the stability of the walls and ceilings. Tarragon 9 was a dangerous place. Tunnels collapsed without warning, gas pockets built up, and rusted machinery could crush or trap the unwary. Evan used this to his advantage, setting small barriers and warning markers to slow down anyone who might follow. Lyra tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. Evan caught her quickly. "Not yet," he said gently. "You need strength. You need time." She nodded, leaning heavily on him as they moved deeper into the network. They reached an old storage shaft, abandoned for decades, where the dust had settled thickly and the machinery lay in rusted ruins. Evan set her down on a pile of old blankets. "This will work for now," he said. "No one checks these tunnels anymore." Lyra examined her surroundings, noting the narrow passages and hidden corners. "You think like a miner," she said. "You know how to survive." Evan smiled faintly. "It is all I know." They spent the day in relative silence. Evan scavenged supplies, searching for anything that could help them defend themselves or communicate with the outside world. He found old power cells, scraps of metal, and even a partially functioning radio transmitter. Lyra watched him, curiosity and admiration mixing in her gaze. "You are clever," she said. "Most humans would have panicked." Evan shrugged. "Clever enough to survive. That is all that matters here." By nightfall, the shadows in the tunnel had grown longer, and Evan knew it was only a matter of time before the Baron's forces realized Lyra was missing. He decided to take a risk. Using the old transmitter, he tried to send a signal to Lyra's people, a distant coalition of intelligent aliens who valued justice and knowledge. He worked carefully, adjusting frequencies and testing power levels. Most signals were blocked by the Baron's surveillance systems, but Evan had a plan. He used the metal ore in the tunnels to amplify the signal in a way that alien scanners would not detect. Hours passed, the tension building with every beep and static burst. Lyra lay on the blankets, her eyes closed but listening. She could feel Evan's determination, the same stubbornness that had brought him this far. Finally, the signal was sent. Evan collapsed against the wall, exhausted but satisfied. "Now we wait," he said. Lyra opened her eyes, faintly smiling. "You risked yourself for me. I do not understand humans fully, but I feel gratitude." Evan looked at her. "It is not about understanding. It is about doing what is right." The next day, the first signs of pursuit appeared. Dust clouds swirled in the distance, and Evan knew the Baron's enforcers were coming. He guided Lyra through a maze of old mining tunnels, using every shortcut and hidden passage he knew. They encountered minor obstacles, collapsed shafts, fallen machinery, and treacherous floors, but Evan used each one to their advantage, slowing their pursuers. Lyra watched in awe as Evan led them with precision, predicting where traps could be laid and how best to use the environment. She had never seen a human move with such quiet confidence, such careful calculation. She realized that humans, though often underestimated, were capable of incredible ingenuity. As the enforcers grew closer, Evan prepared an ambush. He rigged old mining carts with weights and loose machinery, ready to topple them onto anyone following too closely. When the first enforcer stepped into the trap, a crash of metal and stone echoed through the tunnels. The others hesitated, giving Evan and Lyra time to move further into the labyrinth. Lyra's voice trembled slightly. You are risking everything. Why? Evan paused, looking back at her. Because no one deserves to die without a chance, not even in a place like this. The enforcers were relentless, but Evan's knowledge of the tunnels and quick thinking allowed them to stay ahead. For the first time, Lyra began to see humans not as weak creatures, but as beings capable of resilience, creativity, and courage. During a brief pause in a collapsed storage area, Lyra finally asked about Evan's life. You live alone in a dangerous world, and yet you choose to save someone you do not know. Why? Evan looked at the walls, the rusted metal, the dust-covered floor. I do not know if it is bravery or stubbornness. Maybe both, but I cannot ignore someone in need. That is not survival, it is living. Lyra studied him quietly and then nodded. I am glad you are human, she said softly. The next challenge came quickly. The Baron himself arrived, traveling with a small ship equipped with sensors and weapons. The enforcers were faster now, moving through the tunnels with precision, guided by the Baron's tracking devices. Evan realized that clever tricks and traps might not be enough this time. He needed a plan that combined his human ingenuity with Lyra's knowledge of alien technology. Lyra, despite her weakness, began to guide him. She knew certain frequencies could interfere with the Baron's sensors, certain materials could block tracking signals. Together, they modified the old transmitter, creating a small device that would jam the Baron's tracking for a limited time. Evan marveled at her intellect. You are more than just someone to protect, he said. You are important. Lyra smiled faintly, despite her exhaustion. And you are more than a simple miner. Humans surprise me. The night fell, and with it came the final test. The Baron's enforcers were closing in, their footsteps echoing through the tunnels, their weapons ready. Evan set the transmitter to jam the sensors just long enough for them to escape a heavily guarded shaft. With Lyra leaning on him, they moved silently, carefully avoiding patrols and traps. At one point, they reached a vertical shaft that had been used for ore transport. Evan rigged a rope and pulley system, using his knowledge of mining to create a makeshift elevator. Slowly, carefully, they descended into a deeper network of tunnels that the Baron's forces rarely explored. As they moved, Evan thought about the humans he had known, the loneliness he had endured, and the dangers he had faced. He realized something important. Humans were not weak. They could adapt, innovate, and persevere. And sometimes, the smallest human spark could ignite hope in the darkest places. Lyra's breathing steadied as they reached a hidden cavern deep below the mining complex. The walls glowed faintly with the natural luminescence of Tarragon 9's mineral veins. For a moment they both paused, catching their breath. Evan set Lyra down gently and she looked around in awe. This is safe for now, Evan said, running a hand through his dusty hair. We have to stay hidden until we can get you back to your people. Lyra nodded. And how will we do that? Evan smiled faintly. We survive, we fight, we wait. Humans always find a way. They spent the night in the cavern, listening to the distant hum of the mining operations above. Evan prepared makeshift defenses, using rocks, metal scraps, and broken machinery to create barriers. Lyra helped as much as she could, still weak, but contributing her knowledge of alien technology. By dawn, Evan felt a sense of cautious optimism. The transmitter had sent the signal. Their position was hidden for now, and Lyra was slowly regaining strength. But he knew the Baron would not give up easily. He had defied the Baron, protected Lyra, and outsmarted his enforcers so far, but the real test was still ahead. Evan sat beside Lyra, watching the faint glow of the mineral veins. You will be safe, he said quietly. I promise. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear, gratitude, and hope. You are human, she said softly, and humans are remarkable. Evan nodded, feeling a surge of determination. Tarragon 9 was harsh, the Baron was merciless, and the world was unforgiving. But humans had something no one could take away: courage, ingenuity, and the will to survive. And with that, Evan and Lyra prepared for whatever came next, knowing that the challenges ahead would test them both, but also knowing that together, they were stronger than anyone could imagine. The hidden cavern was quiet, but Evan knew it could not last. The Baron's enforcers were relentless, and word of Lyra's disappearance had already spread through the mining complex. Every passing hour increased the danger, and Evan realized that hiding was only a temporary solution. They needed a plan that would end this, not just delay it. Lyra, now slightly stronger, sat beside him. Her pale blue skin glowed faintly in the mineral light, and her large eyes studied Evan with a mixture of trust and curiosity. "You saved me," she said softly, "and yet you risk your life every moment. Why?" Evan looked at her, tired but determined. "Because it is the right thing to do. No one deserves to be left to die, not on this planet, not anywhere. Humans, we do not always wait for orders or rewards. Sometimes we act because we must." Lyra nodded slowly, absorbing his words. For the first time, she felt a spark of hope, not only for herself, but for the possibility that humans could change the balance of power. Evan had already considered their options. The transmitter had sent a signal to Lyra's people, the distant alien coalition that valued justice and intelligence. They would respond, but it would take time. And in Tarragon 9's unforgiving terrain, waiting was dangerous. The Baron's enforcers would not give them even a single moment of peace. They spent the night preparing. Evan gathered every piece of scrap metal, old machinery, and loose rock he could find, constructing barricades and makeshift traps. Lyra assisted as best she could, using her knowledge of alien technology to enhance the effectiveness of the defenses. Together, they created a small network of tunnels that could be defended with minimal effort, relying on ingenuity rather than strength. As dawn broke, a faint hum reached their ears, a signal in the distance. Lyra's people were on their way. The relief was immediate but fleeting. Evan knew the Baron would not wait for their arrival. He would come personally to enforce his control and reclaim what he considered his property. Hours later, the first enforcers arrived. They moved through the tunnels with precision, expecting an easy capture. But Evan had anticipated them. When the first soldier stepped into the trap, rocks fell from above, knocking him unconscious. The others hesitated, unsure of the terrain. Evan and Lyra moved quickly, using their knowledge of the tunnels to stay one step ahead. Lyra's confidence grew with each successful maneuver. "You think like a hunter," she remarked, dodging a collapsing passageway. Evan smiled faintly. "Humans have had to survive against worse than this. On many worlds, cleverness is stronger than brute force." The enforcers pressed on, more cautious now. They had underestimated Evan once, and it would cost them. Using narrow shafts and unstable floors, Evan lured them deeper into the tunnels, where the rock formations and old mining debris became weapons in themselves. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated by the sounds of collapsing metal and shouted commands. Evan realized that the Baron would arrive soon, personally this time. He prepared accordingly, knowing that no trap or clever maneuver could replace courage in the face of an intelligent, ruthless adversary. The ground shook as the Baron's hovering vehicle entered the tunnels, sensors scanning for movement. Evan crouched beside Lyra, his hands steady despite the tension. "We fight smart," he whispered, "not recklessly." The Baron emerged from the shadows, imposing and alien, his eyes glowing with anger and pride. "Give me the girl," he demanded, his voice echoing through the tunnels. "No human can hide her from me." Evan stood, placing himself between the Baron and Lyra. "You misjudge humans," he said calmly. "We do not give up, we do not surrender, and we do not obey tyrants." The Baron laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated off the rock walls. "Foolish human, you will die and she will return to me." Evan's mind raced. Fighting the Baron directly was suicide, but he remembered the tunnels, the traps, and Lyra's knowledge of alien technology. Using a combination of quick thinking and careful maneuvering, he led the Baron through a section of the tunnels rigged to collapse. Rocks and metal crashed down, forcing the Baron to retreat and momentarily giving Evan the advantage. Lyra, recovering enough to act, joined him. She used a small device she had hidden to interfere with the Baron's sensors, creating a brief window where he could not track them. Together, they moved deeper into the labyrinth, staying ahead of the Baron's fury. For hours they ran, fought, and outsmarted the enforcers. Evan's knowledge of human engineering proved decisive. He used levers, pulleys, and unstable ceilings to create barriers, slowing the Baron's pursuit. Lyra's intelligence complemented his physical skill, allowing them to manipulate the Baron's technology against him. Finally, the distant hum of ships reached them, a fleet arriving in response to Lyra's signal. The alien coalition had come. Their ships blocked the entrance to the tunnels, forcing the Baron to halt. His pride did not allow retreat, but the overwhelming presence of the coalition left him with no choice. Evan and Lyra emerged from the tunnels, exhausted but alive. The coalition forces surrounded the Baron, who realized that his power had crumbled in the face of unity, intelligence, and the courage of a single human. "You will answer for your crimes," one of the coalition leaders said, stepping forward. The Baron's eyes blazed, but he could not resist. Lyra, standing beside Evan, lifted her head. "This human saved me," she said, her voice strong and clear. "He risked everything for me, and because of him you will face justice." The miners who had been forced to serve under the Baron emerged from their hiding places, witnessing the humans' bravery. Murmurs spread quickly. Humans could resist, humans could fight, and humans could inspire. The story of Evan Cole began to spread like wildfire across Tarragon 9. The Baron was taken away, powerless and humiliated. His enforcers, seeing the fall of their master, surrendered without resistance. The mining colony, once under tyranny, was freed. Evan was offered wealth, rank, and comfort by the coalition, but he refused. He had survived alone for years, and he had learned that freedom, dignity, and purpose were worth more than anything else. He chose to remain on Tarragon 9, helping the miners rebuild, creating a safe place where humans and aliens could coexist. Lyra stayed with him, no longer a victim but a partner and friend. She had seen the strength of humans firsthand, their courage, ingenuity, and determination. And she had learned that even the smallest human could ignite hope, spark change, and stand against tyranny. The miners began to respect Evan, not as a leader imposed from above, but as one who had earned their trust. He taught them to use their knowledge to think creatively and to survive against impossible odds. Slowly, Tarragon 9 began to change. Evan and Lyra often stood at the edge of the desert, watching the suns rise over the dust-colored horizon. "We did it," Lyra said softly. Evan shook his head. "We did not do it alone. Humans are clever, but sometimes it takes more than one species to make a difference." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting hope and determination. "I will never forget you, Evan. You showed me what humans are capable of." Evan laughed quietly, a sound he had not heard from himself in years. "And I will never forget you. You reminded me why we survive, why we fight, and why we never give up." Tarragon 9 remained harsh and unforgiving, but it was no longer a place of despair. Humans had proven their worth, not through strength alone, but through courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act when no one else would. And for Evan Cole, the lonely miner who had once walked the desert alone, life had finally gained meaning. He had found friendship, purpose, and hope, and he knew that no matter what the future held, humans, simple, clever, and indomitable, would continue to rise, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Lyra stood beside him, and for the first time they both felt truly free. The Baron's shadow was gone, the mines were no longer cursed, and a new era had begun. And across the stars the story spread. One human, small and underestimated, had changed everything. The deserts of Tarragon 9 whispered of courage and hope, and the name Evan Cole became legend, a reminder that sometimes the smallest spark could light an entire world.